for the backend in general, and what do you see how it is progressing right now? Jonathan, over to you.
I'm certainly not any expert on backend in Dart. I've just done some. I still have a production server running Aqueduct now, that because Aqueduct is no longer being updated, I'm just running what version of Dart, some really old version of Dart that's still clunking away, but it's working. But I have to rewrite the whole back end just to take Aqueduct out, which kind of taught me a lesson about relying on third-party packages. Right? Because I was basing my whole back end on Aqueduct. When Aqueduct stopped, it's like, oh no. So that kind of brought me back to, let's rely on something a little bit more stable than maybe another company or maybe an individual developer. And so if, like, in the future, if I continue with backend on Dart, I would probably look at Shelf, or maybe is it Frog? What's the new backend package by Very Good Ventures? Anyway, they're a pretty stable company, so I would trust probably using them. But Shelf is developed by the Dart team itself, so it's even though it's maybe a little more low level than some of the others, I would probably look at trying that out.
Okay, got the perspective. So, what do you still? What is your general understanding about Dart? Because there is still some work going on, in my understanding, on the backend side. Okay, but on the backend side, what I mean is Dart being a language to be used as a backend thing. So, what is your, you can say, sort of feeling? How will Dart go on the backend part?
You'll probably
feeling
want
is
to
the
ask
right word. Yeah.
Questions, because, like, for me, I'm an amateur programmer that I needed a backend, and I didn't want to spend a ton of money for something, so I need just buy a cheap server and get something running, and I didn't want to learn a whole new language just to make the backend. So I took a language I already knew and just got something to work. And so it's what I've done is nothing complex or super hard. So as far as where it's going and what the best options are, Brian will be your better guy to ask for that one.
For me, I guess it's almost more of a marketing problem than a technology problem. Okay. Like, you can say, like, okay, Aqueduct gets the job done. You might actually want, there's a fork of Aqueduct called Conduit. That updates the most recent version of Dart, so you get null safety, but they probably broke a bunch of APIs along the way, so I don't know if it'll be a brutal experience updating it. But it was kind of like, so in the history of Dart kind of originally started off as a web language. Like, it was supposed to be another language that ran alongside JavaScript. So you had Dart running in Chrome, and that would end up kind of forking the web, where people kind of write Dart websites as opposed to JavaScript websites. And there was not the greatest response to that. So for a long time, like, Dart just kind of like floundered, or at least floundered externally. Inside Google, it was still used quite heavily, but outside, not so much. And it took Flutter to come around to kind of give Dart second wind. And I remember when Flutter was first kind of announced, there was a lot of people pushing back against Dart. Like, yeah, this Flutter thing sounds cool, but why did you use Dart? That's so weird. Why not Kotlin? Why not JavaScript? And the Flutter team there's quite a few articles about, like, justifying their use of Dart as to why it was the right language to choose. So when it comes to, like, server-side Dart, there's no like Flutter on the back end. And then by when I say Flutter, I mean like a marketing huge project with a big team and big money behind it that would draw people to use it. Like, there's a lot of smaller projects. So you have your Aqueducts, your Shelves, your all these, like every other day on the Dart subreddit, I see, like, oh, I have this new experimental app server that I just built in Dart, and then the next day you see another one. So it doesn't really inspire confidence as to which one you're going to go into, because these are just like one-man projects. And if that person gets busy or moves on to something else, or it's just doesn't, the support just isn't really there. So I'm almost thinking like when Node came out, and JavaScript was no longer bound to the website, and you have a legion of web developers who've been writing JavaScript for years and years, now have this access to take the language that they already knew, but be able to reach a much further audience. Like, that became like a fulcrum for JavaScript to just explode. Now, Dart has seen a meteoric rise with Flutter, that's for sure, but they have not penetrated the server yet. Maybe they never will. Maybe they don't need to. Maybe Flutter's enough. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah. So as it stands right now, like if you really want something stable for, I would probably say something like Spring Boot. Might be a better option. It's a more established, also fairly boring framework, or use Go or even Node if that's your preference. But it seems like it's going to be hard to find a server-side Dart program that's going to be around for the long run.